Hello, Savannah. Hello, 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 and welcome to another edition of Kandily Kesha on this Monday. Monday. I am so happy to be joined by Mr. John McMasters, former county commissioner and current community activist and co-founder of Better Savannah. Listen, we want to jump right into it tonight, John. Thank you so much for joining us. I asked you specifically to come on because you and a couple of others follow city council, county commission, and matters involving our state representative, state senator, as well as our school district here in Savannah. And we want to thank you for staying on the front lines of all things that matter to our community. Because if it were not for you, we would only be hearing one side or one narrative, if you will, in terms of what's going on among our local governments. And so we know that you have broke the news with regard to the police survey that circulated in our city among our locals. But still to this date, the sitting council who the citizens of Savannah elected, sent to office to keep charge over these issues, still do not have that document in hand. We know that this is a personnel matter. We know that the city manager is charged with handling all of our personnel matters, but we also know that we as a council have a greater responsibility to assuring that those who we call to protect and serve the community are also protected and served. And this survey it offers a very glaring account of what we already know and what we have known for at least the last 2 years. From the first month I took office, we were getting complaints, written and verbal, text messages, emails from police officers, from lower rank all the way up to highest ranks. And we petitioned each of the city managers. I've had four city managers in the 2.5 years that I've been in office, and we had hope that the new city manager, Jay Melder, coming in would look at this more closely. We talked in depth with him during the interview and expressed to him how concerned we were about leadership in our police department and the morale or the lack thereof in the in the police department. Further, he expressed to us that he had a 90-day plan. Well, we are twice past that 90 days, and here we are, still increasing in the number of gun violence episodes, increasing in the number of homicide. Morale seems to be increasingly getting worse. And still today, there is no response other than a survey that demonstrates or lays out what we already knew. And so I asked you to come on, John, to just give your account. And I'm going to let you sort of take it from here and express to us what your thoughts are about the survey, the conditions, and the lack or the failed response of this council and leadership.
Okay, I'll certainly do my best. And thanks for having me on and all the nice accolades you gave me. But I just want to take a minute and point out that shows like yours and the other programming that ATR is producing, people like Jim Marikis with the Savannian, even the Savannah Morning News has brought in some fresh reporters. I'm talking about Zoe Nicholson and Drew on the crime beat, Nancy Kwan. So, it's nice that there is a emerging community of people who will counter that narrative that the majority on city council love to try to control. So I just want to say we've made some progress. Nobody's getting tired. We may take a little rest here and there, but it is really significant to the outcomes and the cultural reality that is Savannah that there is an emerging group of like-minded people, don't agree with everything, but certainly they agree with a substantial portion. You are part of that hope and change, and I thank you. Let's talk about the police report, the survey. For your readers, this was an official City of Savannah study that was called the Continuing Improvement Survey. I printed a copy of it. It's 140 pages, and 255 police personnel participated in the survey. Not everyone answered every single question, but considering that this was an internal, in-house City of Savannah human resources effort, they can't attack it because they own it. So that's an important consideration. The other thing I'd like to point out after reading it, there's a lot of good stuff in it. Obviously, there's a ton of red lights and cautionary components, but there is some very healthy, very positive information in it, and it is mostly confined, Kesha. All that positiveness is confined to the precinct level and below. The guys that are riding around, doing the hard work, as opposed to the command staff, and the survey clearly delineates, once you've read it, that the people that are working the beat on the street in the local precinct work well together. They are united. They are trusting of their own fellow coworkers at the precinct level. So I don't want anyone to say, well, you're being shrill and you're only highlighting the negative uh, information and data that came out of this study. There's great news at the precinct level. These guys are tight and unified. The wheels come off the the train when you get outside of the precinct uh, ecosphere and you start getting into what's called command staff, and that's where, boy, it is eye-opening and uh, dangerous, the level of distrust that exists uh, after the precinct level, all through the command staff up to, and I presume, including the chief. Um, I could talk more, but is that essentially?
Well, yeah, I do want you to talk more because you're right. As far as the day to day and the officers who work alongside each other, I think that's really the saving grace of why we have the harmony we do have. This report scares me. It scares me as a sitting older person, and it scares me as a citizen of Savannah. As far as I'm concerned, with the conditions of this police department, coupled by the level of crime and gun violence on the streets, we truly are facing a public health issue. And so the accounts range from toxic leadership to overworked staff to outdated technology. And I want to say to Rachel Fiore of the Savannian, she offered a very detailed account of this report. And between us recognizing where we have expressed concern about the bleed of police officers, more than 50 resigned last year. We are losing more than we are recruiting. When we are recruiting officers, uh, and these officers are leaving for lower paid jobs or smaller departments, or they are just leaving law enforcement altogether. And we know what the national trends and national averages are with regard to this profession of policing. But we also know that we have a unique circumstance here in Savannah. We are currently 100 police officers more short, 100 or more police officers short. My husband likes to say, Kesha, you forget the one that's assigned to the mayor to open his door and to go get his breakfast, lunch, and dinner and to answer the phones in the mayor's office. And so when you see that type of decision making and when you see the allowance of our professional staff being loaned to the mayor's personal detail, if you will, it's another element that adds to the low morale. And
Well,
so, between the toxic leadership, overworked staff, outdated technology, the bleed of the police officers, and being over 100 short, take us through what this looks like, John.
okay. Well, the police department has a budgeted uh, amount to fund 626 positions at the police department. Um, I think less than 100 of those are civilian payroll jobs. The rest are sworn officers. And the uh, the fact of the matter is, Keisha, because we've been around for a while. I mean, I I first met you over at First Presbyterian Church with the Interfaith Hospitality Network at what was that, 15 years ago, maybe even close to 20. And we have always not factored in our real population. What I'm saying is, um, the number of tourists that are here every day, the number of SCAD students that are living here in this community, the number of visitors, which is different than a tourist. A visitor is someone that lives in Effingham, Bryan, Liberty County, and they drive in to go to work, or they drive in to a doctor's appointment. You combine the tourist, the visitor, the SCAD students, and regrettably, over 4,000 homeless people. Uh, you have you have a service population that is uh, you know 50 or 60% larger than what we're staffing up to. Now, this gets a little complicated, but bear with me. The uh, 626 budgeted employees of the police department, when you're down 100 officers, 85 officers, which has been going on for as long as we've known each other. I mean, this is not anything new. This is a systemic reality that we have someone at the city has just decided not to do the math based on the real population. And 15 years ago, counting the SCAD and the visitors and those ancillary numbers was less overall. It was a much smaller number. There's no denying that today, with 14 million visitors a year coming in, and SCAD with a 12,500 student population, um, you know, SCAD population is the equivalent to the population of Port Wentworth. Anyway, we're not calculating the need for service for all these other populations. The police department is staffing up and making a budget request based on a census population of 155,000. We have over 200,000 people on any given day inside the city of Savannah. Now, uh, they're going to have their car broken into. They could have their purse snatched. They could have a flat tire. And yes, they call the police to fix flat tires, crazy as that sounds. My point is the service demands of that additional 50,000 population. There's no way in the world that even a fully staffed 626 department can do the job properly. And this survey, Eternal City of Savannah, uh, bears that out and confirms it unequivocally. For instance, 84% of Savannah Police Department employees believe the precincts are understaffed. Um, that's an incredible number. That's not a marginal deviation. Uh, 84% of everyone working at the Savannah Police Department thinks they're understaffed. Now, uh, why we haven't staffed up is a very good question. I don't have an answer for it. But I will tell you that we have been told for 2 decades now that this very most important thing we can do as a matter of policy at the police department is something that's called community policing. Community policing, uh, for simplicity, is a proactive approach as compared to a reactive approach. A reactive approach is someone has an issue and needs the police, and they call 911 or the non-emergency number, and the police respond. That's reactive. Community policing uh, is both reactive, but it also includes the element of getting to know key people in the neighborhood that you build a bond with and create a level of trust with, so that if you need some intelligence to stymie something that might be planned, that intelligence comes to you. Um, the crux of this is with 2.5 officers per thousand, which is what we have on a good day if all the positions were filled. That keeps you stuck in the reactive model. It does not in any way, shape, or form allow you the luxury of going beyond reactive into proactive. So, you want me to keep prattling on about this? Um, I'm gonna mute myself and see if we've lost the signal. Hey, are we still on?
Hello, Savannah. Hello, Savannah.
Are we
Listen,
on?
John, the last thing I heard you say, you were talking about what we have been talking about for the longest, and that's the fact that we do not count the number of police officers we need based on the number of tourists to Savannah, the visitors, and the people
Citizens and the homeless. Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
so because
Well
there's
over 200.
already that disconnect and that mix match, that puts us at even more of a deficit. And so we already know that the majority of our police power is relegated to the downtown corridors where those populations are primarily. And so let's fast forward to what do we do and what is the responsibility of our city council? During the last meeting, I asked that we go into executive session as a result of the report that I received that wasn't given to me by leadership. I had already been expressing concern to our city manager. Every time we receive an alert of another death on the streets of Savannah, it's very, very alarming to me. I feel like somehow we as a community, particularly our leadership, both on the city and county level, we let the county off the hook a great deal here when it comes to these community issues. We have somehow become desensitized to the notice of African American male losing his life on the streets of Savannah. We had an individual as our guest last week, and he was a Caucasian gentleman who basically acknowledged that there is a disconnect where this demographic is concerned. And he basically stated, until white people stand up and start talking about this as an issue and a real problem, we probably won't solve it. But I also like to think that until we start tackling crime and gun violence from a proactive approach as opposed to a reactive approach, we're not going to tackle this. And so in tackling this issue and these problems that we have with crime and gun violence and issues related to our personnel, everything, as you know, John, starts and stops with policy presentation, policy initiatives. Policies are essentially what effectuate changes in community and changes within our administration. But we as a sitting council have not to date, we have not presented or proposed any legislation that would affect our police department by way of administration, or that would affect our community and her safety. And I think that is a colossal fail. Someone sent me Adam Van Brimmer's account of him acknowledging that the mayor's take on this probably was not the most sound in judgment, but he failed to acknowledge those of us on council who have been aggressively advocating from day one. Within our first quarter of elected office on this council.
Well, you're expecting too much, Kesha.
Well, by March of 2020, we had already eclipsed the number of homicide from the previous year. And we were logging record numbers of deaths on the streets of Savannah in March of 2020 and February of 2020. And I said at that time during the council workshop, it's recorded, and it's archived. You can go back and listen to it. I asked the police chief at that time, what was it that we needed to do by way of whether it's financial resources, personnel, programming, activities. What is it that this council could do to give you the tools necessary to turn the tide where this crime was concerned?
Well, don't misunderstand me. I didn't say that you weren't accurate. I just said your expectations were a little too large. You're absolutely correct.
But no, in terms of how it was received, right?
Yeah, I mean, voters sent in a group to council. I mean, everybody knows this by now, Kesha. Voters wanted change, and they didn't want just a little tweaking here and there. They really wanted a fresh, new, call it progressive, call it what you want, group of leaders to fix a lot of the systemic problems that had gone on, for the Deloach administration, the Edna Jackson administration, and back to Otis's. Anyway, that got kittywampus and sabotaged by defections over to the status quo. So what the voters had manifest in their voting dissolved, and it left just 3 of you now on the right side of what the voters asked for in 2019. You're blocked by a lot of chicanery with rules package changes and power plays and a totally autocratic mayor. I mean, the mayor doesn't even let his own people have a voice. I mean, Dietrich really doesn't have a voice. Linda doesn't have a voice. Nick probably has the most attention, and Curtis is a distant third. So we'll have another shot at this. And to be back at the base of this, you were absolutely correct from the beginning about talking to the city manager and saying, what do you need to get crime under control? Now, you and I both know, and I'm going to filibuster for a minute here, the bigger tool, but heavier tool in our toolbox is trying to reduce poverty.
Right.
Instead of trying to police our way to lower crime stats, there's another way to go. But it's a very hard, I mean, it's hard enough keeping a full staff of police officers. It's even harder to get the bureaucrats under the Gold Dome to understand that they're not really calculating service population correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But Van Brimmer did say, and this is, you got to take the little wins here. He said today that the staffing levels at the Savannah Police Department are atrociously, that's a big word, atrociously low, and a problem. So,
but you know what, John, I'm a hard driver, and I don't mince words. I call things as they are. And so in as much as I can give a nod to Van Brimmer's piece, I still think that he is providing cover as opposed to coverage. And it is in large part the responsibility of our local media affiliates, both print and television, for where we are today. Had they not been so laser focused on the sensationalism of perceived interpersonal issues, from ethics complaints to
there are distractions.
But they are distractions that sold papers and broaden the airways. And what they now see as a result of them providing cover for a failed administration and for favorites, for members of council who are marginalized and they are hell-bent to make them superheroes, they now see that as a result of that, the cookie is now starting to crumble, and people are now seeing all this for what it's worth. And so now you want to come Johnny come lately. As I stated, John, the headline from last Saturday or Sunday for Savannah Morning News, I was told, was that crime is up. Newsflash, crime has always been up. Crime is like way up. Who told you ever to crime was never down?
Well, I have to agree with you, and I can't. I guess it's a question of perspective, and I get your perspective. Uh, I'm just trying to express that to have Adam Van Brummer, who's been an apologist uh, for this leadership on council, the majority, um, as well as other subjects, SCAD, for instance, pilot program not going anywhere. I mean, uh, the fact that he has come just a little bit over and is now telling it correctly, I got to welcome that. It's easier. Uh, Ivan's absolutely right. It's much easier for the newspaper and the TV stations to report about bad stuff, emotional stuff, um, stuff that they think will maintain their viewership. But listen, that's where ATR, the Savannian, the Current, other sources are now emerging to tell what we're not getting. The story that we're not getting from mainstream media is now got a toehold or a purchase in the consciousness of the community, and it's growing every day. So, you know, we've it ain't perfect. It shouldn't have happened, and I really think that the telltale will be the next election and how much further our growth continues. You can see that people are just up in arms over this SCAD 17 story apartment dormitory. Um, the the community is waking up on that front. The mainstream media, at least in the Savannah Morning News, Zoe Nicholson's 3-part series on SCAD. I mean, we wouldn't have seen that 2 years ago, or 12 years ago, or 15 years ago. So it's just a shame that what we got from the last election was a managed teleprompter style spin mechanism. It's like the White House briefing room. Um, the mayor gets on uh, camera more often than any other mayor, and I've been here 30 years, and I don't see a, a voice or any bandwidth for Dietrich or Linda or Curtis. It's all uh, uh, pasteurized, and they just follow the mayor's lead. Uh, I I would hope that many of the people that have voted for them are disappointed that they voted and expected one thing and they got something totally different. Uh, sure, they've done some good things here and there, but overall is the context I'm trying to express this. They realize it's obvious that this is Van's council. The mayor is autocratic and suppresses access to the agenda, access to the media, sending city staff to your or Alicia's town hall meetings. I mean, I think it's obvious, and it's not a healthy thing. It's not what voters voted for. So there has to be some rebalancing.
Right.
Not
And
just rhetoric. I mean, the rhetoric, if you were to gauge this council based on rhetoric and spin. They're, you know, they've got a perfect record. When you look at where are we on term limits, which most everyone campaigned and promised? Nowhere. Where are
Right.
we on impact fees on new development to stop residents from having to absorb the costs of growth? Nowhere. Okay. Where are we on pilot fees with the Savannah College of Art and Design? You know, who really have a tax bill of $36 million a year, and they don't pay any of it. Yet their population, their student population, is as large as Port Wentworth, half the size of Pooler. Where are we on trying to create a better, more balanced relationship with the Port of Savannah, the GPA? Nowhere. So on one hand, you have the consummate rhetoric and you know, spin management, narrative management that Van is so good at. And then when you go to the reality, it's not there.
Right. And so what I want to go back to what you were saying about the power plays. What about the latest power play? The latest power play of not going into executive session. Have you ever seen or heard of such? I think the best way for us to approach or to address the situation with this survey and its findings are to go into executive session and have a conversation with our city manager about what his plans are. He said he had a 90-day plan. We are now at all over 180 days. I think the citizens of Savannah deserve to hear and know more about what the plans are in terms of how we are approaching and addressing this. Now, as it relates to the pieces of the current mayor and his maneuvering and how he has the vote of the majority on council and how they go about. What I do want to say to that, John, in as much as there are complaints from the second district, the third district, the fourth district, and the sixth, and now the fifth, they shouldn't complain about anything and what they are or are not getting for their districts. You know why? Because they are the voting majority. And so when people start talking about what they don't have in the sixth, get with your alderman and tell him what you want, because he has the power. They have the power of the vote. And so you, between Better Savannah, ATR, and Unity Political Action Committee, you all have done a great job in educating the electorate. What I don't want to happen, John, is for there to be another election before change comes, right? I don't want to relegate the success of my bid for mayor to having more deaths on the streets of Savannah.
Well,
I don't want.
Of course not. We all would prefer the change we were promised, even if it was small. Okay, give us something, but we get nothing.
Tell us, how do you think the citizens can approach that? How can citizens mobilize? What can they do? What can they say? What can they write? What can they post? What are some things that citizens can do to demand the change that they want, demand the change that they voted in? Because as you know, John, there was a sweeping indictment by the electorate in 2019. They voted nearly an entire council out. Savannah is really good at voting people out who do not perform. But should we get into the pattern? Should we start creating a culture here in Savannah where if we give you 4 years, we're going to let you take the whole 4 years before we get something out of you?
Well, Kesha, I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist, but let me take a stab at trying to answer your question. The shiny object phenomenon of constant press conferences, weekly briefings, Friday night date night, which is really just a
It's a
let's
play on the emotion of single women. It's really sad. It's
well,
really sad.
okay. So,
It's disgusting is what it is.
well, it is what it is. Let's just leave it at that. It is what it is. It's the path fan shows. Um, People ultimately are understanding that the presentation and the spin and the packaging is not being backed up with reality. That is, um, we're tearing up our zoning and permitting 17 story apartment buildings for SCAD, who pays no property tax, who's going to get this project approved before we get an impact fee ordinance passed, because it's been slow rolled by the mayor and his members on council. When
Have you
people,
have you done an estimate of what we're missing out on that building alone, John?
well, I don't know the total. Do you know the total project cost?
I don't.
Okay, well, we
This
need to know.
this project. Do you know that this project includes a parking garage across the street from it?
I'm sure it does. It's no different than the 11 acres that SCAD bought off of Louisville Road to expand Medin Studios. It's no different than what they've done on West Victory Drive. It's no different than the straw purchase of Chatham Apartments. It's no different than York Hall, which was the Westside Urban Health Clinic from 2008. There's a pattern to the SCAD real estate moves, and we keep seeing it over and over again. In the meantime, the mayor's so buddy, he goes to a ribbon cutting on Pulaski Square when SCAD converts 16 studio apartments. So 232 apartments get taken out of the affordable housing inventory by SCAD, and they replace it with 16. I mean, that math doesn't work anywhere.
Right. Oh, excuse me.
Well,
it's not funny. It's really sad. It's really sad. It's really
no,
sad.
it's a very polished, almost Washington-esque pattern and template that the mayor follows, and that only, I want to believe, Kesha, that only holds water for a little while, and pretty soon you realize that there's a hole in your bucket and you're losing your water, to borrow the metaphor, and you begin to say, you know what? They tell me it's better, but I don't think it's really better. I expected some progress in this area or that area, and it hasn't happened. So we're kind of in a war of attrition with the public's patience and fondness for this autocratic administration.
Yeah,
So,
it's starting to show, but for me, John, more than the pieces related to leadership style and leadership decisions, it's how this is all playing out in our city. Let's talk about. I'm jumping around a little bit here, and I wanted to give a recap of some council highlights. I don't have the opportunity to bend your ear or have you on very often, so forgive me for taking advantage of you.
No,
you know the arena project is the single largest construction project in the history of Savannah, only second now to what the governor is doing over across the water at the Trade Center. I was coming on council, I had a problem with that project, right? For me, it was a hope and a wish, this whole idea or notion of that being an economic driver for Carver Village, Cloverdale.
Now we know what it is. Now we know what it is. It's an anchor that is attached to the taxpayers of the city of Savannah,
Right.
that now that we've made this gargantuan $165 million investment,
169. And right
okay,
now, I could not get a straight answer from the city manager as to where we are. Like, have we expended all those resources? Are we now using other dollars for this project?
well,
John, biggest for me is the parking situation. You and I have not talked about a lot of what's going on or what's come to my attention as of late. But do you know that we were able to negotiate down in the Deloach administration? There was a 10-year contractual agreement with the owners of the property. They say Chatham Steel doesn't own it, but the Chatham Steel family or some very lucky, wealthy person owns that property. So it's now a 5-year contract, right? We paid into the first year in 2021 $500,000, and we haven't been using it to date, John. To date,
yeah,
we have paid $133,000+. So that's nearly $700,000 we have put in the pockets of this property owner, free and
Kesha,
clear per
I,
this contract, and we're not parking there.
I want you to leave the parking lot issue for just a second, okay?
Mhm.
How long did it take for this arena project to finish from, and I'm going to call it finished just for this conversation, from the time we voted it in 2006 until we did the ribbon cutting? Now, I understand there was a recession mixed in there, but basically it took almost 20 years, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. And we can debate back and forth whether it's 170 million or 165 million, but it will not be viable. It will not meet minimum expectations until the canal district is done. Now, I ask you two questions. How much do you think the canal district is going to cost taxpayers? And how long do you think it's going to take to finish it? Now, we know the arena was 165 million. We know it took 20 years. There was a recession. How long, how much on the canal district? That's the issue. I mean, parking is part of this equation, but we are now anchored and obligated to protect this investment by completing the canal district. There's no funding source identified
There's
for it.
no funding for the canal district. So what are you talking about, John? Where's the money going to come from?
The next SPLOST will be completely hollowed out, and all the money, instead of going to neighborhood improvements and parks and stuff that people want and pay to have done, is going to take a back seat, and the canal district will suck out 70 or 80% of SPLOST 8 is my projection.
How do you see the canal district completion being a part of the vitality of the arena? How are you making that connection?
There's a psychological. First of all, let's back up, and I gotta say this. In 2006, when they were launching and talking about the need for this arena, it was why? It was because the Civic Center had outlived its usefulness. The Civic Center needed to be replaced with a new venue. So we were told that the Civic Center had lived out its life and we should go in this direction. Well, you got this $165 million anchor out in West Chatham, and over here you got the historic district. I mean, this arena was built for visitors, okay, as much as it was built for locals. As a matter of fact, probably more for the visitor, the tourist, than the local, okay? So given that we were sold and it took as long as it did and cost as much as it did, there's no connectivity between the historic district, and the MLK corridor, and that's why you're seeing this this push to wipe out Yamacraw and build something new. That's why you're seeing the
Tear
SCAD
down the flyover.
tear down the flyover. They're merging. They want to expand downtown. It's like manifest destiny. They've got to have the next couple of states, to borrow the metaphor. Okay, they want a ocean to ocean country, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, and 70 years later we accomplished that. Well,
Mhm.
the same thing's happening here. This arena was marginally motivated to uplift West Chatham residents. It was.
But still to this day, John, the Alderwoman, Bernetta Lanier, she is fighting tooth and nail just to get placement.
Well, she doesn't even have a neighborhood benefits agreement. What's it called?
Right. But we are putting 15,000 per square murals on the ground. We love investing in the ground. We have $19 million invested in that parking pad that's not environmentally safe, that has to be mitigated. God only knows what's going to happen when it's agitated, the hazardous effects that it's going to provide for those communities.
Listen,
And then
I see that, and it's a travesty. But what about the other 150 to $200 million that's going to be required to complete manifest destiny here? I mean, people did not vote in a continuous sucking and hollowing out of SPLOST to support legacy contractors in the tourism industry.
Well, why do you think that the Canal District was not on the list for the hotel motel tax?
Why wasn't the Canal District?
I mean, that would have been a better.
Well, there's not enough money in the hotel motel tax cut to do the Canal District, Kesha.
Well, a portion of it.
Well, I know, but they'd rather.
65 million.
There's enough for a complete facelift for River Street, so that was their goal. Now, if they get too much pressure and feel the heat about sucking out 2/3 of the next SPLOST, the city will probably turn to bonds and issue general obligation bonds to build it out, and just charge the project on the city credit card.
Well, I want to say this, John, with regard to growth, development, and tourism, I'm not anti-growth. I'm not anti-business. I'm not anti-tourism. But what I am is failing to put communities first. How is it that we can continuously invest in brick and mortar and dirt and grass and not invest in the communities that are most adversely impacted? The quality of life.
You know that. We have never put our neighborhoods and our community first.
But we promised that we will. This council promised that we were going to do it, John, and we have not done it.
I know you're factually correct, but it ain't your fault that Linda, Dietrich, Nick, and Curtis flipped and went over to the institutional business side of the Deloach, Edna Jackson historic model. It was easier for them. They didn't have to get in the way. They didn't have to get bloodied. They didn't have to fight. It was just easier to follow this charismatic, autocratic leader. So
it's so sad. It's so sad because it's such a waste. It's such a waste, especially in the time that we're in. Let me jump to the Civic Center, John. That was another item on the agenda on last Thursday.
Yeah.
So we were supposed to be presented with options, right? Options denote multiple pieces or
more than one choice. Yeah.
So we have Satil and Satil come forth to do this presentation.
He's a very good architect. The guy's I like his style. I mean, he's a sharp architect.
Yes, they're a very credentialed firm. I really appreciated their presentation. I thought it was interesting that the selection of him to sort of shepherd us with this project or the presentation of it anyway came from Michael Brown, so that concerns me. Not so much his talent, his skill, and the value that they will bring, but anything that Michael Brown or Pat Monahan had their hands on, or anyone, I question seriously, because they, in large part, are the reason why the city is in the shape that she's in, and it will probably take decades to dig her way out. And so the mayor, Van Johnson, was adamant that we keep the Johnny Mercer Theater and do away with the MLK Arena. And so it's just the continuation of the theme. You know, we host St. Patrick's Day, but we cancel MLK Day. I don't know. I think this dude is having an identity crisis of some sorts. Nonetheless, we know that the city of Savannah unloaded in the last administration. Our real estate division unloaded a great deal of property,
Right.
because it was their thought that getting it off of the books, and why unloading valuable historic property was a good idea, I would never imagine. But it was interesting to hear the city manager, I don't know if you heard Jay Melder say, it is far better to own property than to lease it.
No, absolutely.
I almost fell out of my seat when he said that.
Well, Eddie and his council were like burning the family furniture to heat the house, right?
It makes me sick to even think about it. It makes me nauseous.
Well, Melder's got that right. Far better to hold on to your assets and manage them and keep up with the maintenance. They're long-term investments, and it's the people own those properties, not any given city council. So, what, you got a question for me about the?
Yeah, so I'm just interested to know. You've been not following just this council, but you follow local government for decades now. There is a unique connection between what happens with the Civic Center and the erection of that arena. There is some maneuvering going on, or some deals that happen where one was predicated on the other. And a lot of people think that the arena was supposed to replace the Civic Center. But what I have been saying from day one is the function of the Johnny Mercer Theater does not happen at the arena. The function of what happens in the MLK Arena still today, shows, smaller shows and events are being booked there. It cannot happen at the arena. And so why have we conditioned the community to think that this arena is now the answer to everything that Savannah needs by way of her special programming, events and occasions and celebrations? The average family will not be able to afford to rent anything in the arena.
Listen, the Johnny Mercer Theater is a nostalgic venue that has a special attachment in a lot of locals' hearts, because that's where they went as a kid. That's where they saw their first concert. That's where they had a great memory. It's political dynamite for the mayor to not save the Johnny Mercer. And I don't think he has the political will to thwart that many locals and their nostalgic attachment to the Johnny Mercer Theater.
So what was he thinking when they desecrated the Weeping Time land? Was he? It wasn't dynamite. Maybe just firecrackers. Maybe just firecrackers.
They won't even.
You can't make this stuff up, John.
They won't even speak the word Weeping Time. It's over and
done.
What
about the MLK Arena? He basically just glossed over. We have to save the Johnny Mercer Theater.
Yeah, well,
what about the MLK Arena? Let's have a conversation at least. And so the one thing that I asked was that we push pause, because, sirs, you've really only given us one real option here. So why can't we push pause and have some community engagement around this issue? Let's have the citizens of Savannah. Let's hear from these people you speak of, John, who still have nostalgic feelings about the arena.
Well,
right? What's the problem with slowing the process? We slow roll everything else.
well, whether you try to fast track it or not, it's going to only slow roll because that's what they do. Um, uh, Take a look at the Cultural Arts Center. Okay.
This is
Um,
Shrine. You mean the Cultural Arts Shrine?
yeah, $26 million.
No way.
Yes.
That building did not cost $26 million.
And Keisha, Google it. Yeah, a Pat Shea project. And Paul Hansen won the scoring and was awarded the project in the RFP process. And Pat was so outraged. His wife managed Edna's campaign. So,
She also manages the current mayor's campaign or finance chair or somebody,
well,
something like that.
if you go back and
You
read
can't
the
make this stuff
media
up.
reporting on it, Edna got the votes on council to go back to the bidding process and revisit it and rescore. And when it got rescored, guess who got the job now? It wasn't Paul Hansen.
Well,
But
guess what? Guess what, John? The
there's
same
nothing
thing happened
new.
with the fairgrounds. The same thing happened with the fairgrounds. What's his
Keisha,
name?
if you're
Oh,
saying
look,
we're surrounded by special interest projects that
the,
benefit
the,
legacy contractors while we
listen,
ignore neighborhoods, you'll get no argument from me.
listen. The Pelote Corporation won the scoring for the fairgrounds. Pelote Corporation, but somebody pissed and moaned. Michael Brown had a fit, and he lied to the media and said he was resigning because I cursed him, which did never happen. And so he leaves because he gets into this little tisk with Van about the fairgrounds and who's going to manage it or who's going to be the contractor for it. And so they do all these charrettes, put it back out to bid. We receive the bids from the developers, and guess who rises to the top? Patrick Shea and Company, and some
Well,
of Dr. Stella Shabazz's friends and family members. It's insane. It's like the
yeah,
same play out of the same playbook over and over again. And it's really, really painful to watch. It's really, really painful to watch
no doubt.
and to sit and take it. So what do we do? What do we do? What
Uh,
do we do? I can keep kicking against the prick. I can keep railing against the establishment and fighting for equity and trying to get people to do the right thing and expose some of this stuff. But John, it
well,
gets pretty exhausting.
look, this is a really great question. I'm glad you asked it. Okay. The very most important thing, bar none, that we have to have in the next round of city elections in 2023 is better candidates. Okay. We have to have smart, unbought, compassionate people who will not fold like a cheap tent, like 4 members of this council did. Okay. The go along to get along phenomenon, I think, is cured.
I don't get it, John. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. I mean, I've had people, present things to me in one way or the other, and I often say jokingly, but it is true. I'm the only person on city council outside of this $25,000 annual stipend who doesn't have a job. I don't have a regular income. I don't have a pension. I'm not retired from anything. If anyone should have buckled and folded by now, it should have been me. What
Well,
what what we also need is we need people who are coming into office who are essentially not broke. People
well,
who don't have resources, who are not self-led, people who have low self-esteem. This job is not for the faint of heart.
no, you
Really,
have to be
truly.
a crusader. You got to be part crusader, part rebel, part priest. Uh, you you just can't take the average person and get the sort of candidate that we need to stand up against decades, centuries of entrenched cronyism that
It's
favors the business community over the
yeah,
citizenry. It
yeah.
is the history of this town.
But
And
it doesn't seem that difficult. You know, John, after spending 25 years on the front lines of the worst hurt that citizens of this city experience, from nutrition insecurity to gang
rape,
and gun violence among youth to victims of rape and sexual assault to domestic violence, to homelessness and hunger in this town. I could not be a part of that level of need, lack, despair, and hurt, and then come to this table, take this seat, and then turn my back
well,
on.
no one expected you to change who you are. You brought to the job who you are, and it just wasn't popular. That's why you got ethics charges and problems and friction and shenanigans, moving your seat around. I mean, they're not ready for you, Kesha.
Well, they'll
I
be
mean,
ready.
you're the right person,
They'll
but
be ready.
we
They'll
need.
be ready, and I am ready. And so, what I want to start doing, John, is, well, not start doing. What I want to continue to do, because I will not be removed from this standard that
Oh,
we are
we
trying
get it.
to create.
We get
Uh,
it. You're not changing.
right.
we we
But
get.
here's the thing. I had a conversation with Chuck. Um, I think it was Saturday night, early Sunday morning. I don't know.
Yeah, I got it.
We spent a lot of time together on the phone. Um, and he was talking about my approach to, I don't know, something that occurred on council. And the only thing I could think about was uh, Chuck is
He's a
he
sharp
always,
guy.
he's very sharp when it comes to politics.
Yep.
He is at the top of the craft with this stuff, right?
Absolutely.
And so and which is why I listen to his advice and what he says. But as I listen to one of his comments, and I can't remember what it was I was saying or did on council, but it was something that I had an issue with in terms of a purchasing item for a legacy contractor on our
To deliver agendas. I heard about it.
right.
Yeah.
And so and Chuck said, Kesha, you can't chase everything down and make it right. And then somebody else said to me, well, it's a Black man finally getting something within the city government, so let him have it.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. I'm not a saint by any stretch. I'm not a devil either. But what's right is right, and what's wrong is wrong when it comes to the people and their needs. When it comes to the coffers of the city of Savannah, when you sign up for this watch, it should be to do the right thing. And so, what I want to say to that, John, is I want to remind you all that we did not come to play the game. We came to change the game. And so if I were coming to the table and I had friends who were developers and contractors, or if I had friends who did business with the city of Savannah, then I would have a greater appreciation for those areas where we could collaborate, negotiate, trade off, collective bargain. But how do you trade off? What am I going to trade off when I'm advocating for poverty reduction? What am I going to collaborate on when I just want to get people off of the street, get families into homes and out of hotels? How do you negotiate for any benefits when it comes to crime? We're either going to stop it or we're not. So I can wheel and deal with the best of them. For a decade, 2 decades or more, I ran very successful charities in this town. And I was only able to run them successfully because of my negotiations and work with wealthy people. So I got that. I can check that box. But the game has to change, John.
Well, we need more people that they don't have to have as much of your empathy and drive and commitment. You're kind of unique in that regard, Keisha, because you don't adapt or flex or give in. You are persistent and tenacious. Uh, if we just had people who wanted to do the job honestly, I mean, your campaign tagline, "Not for sale," kind of prologue was past or past is prologue. I mean, you put it out there in front. This is me. I'm not for sale. I mean, do you realize there are people that get elected and all they want is to be a celebrity in their community?
I know. It's sad.
That's it. That's
It's
it.
it's really sad. It's really sad. Well, John, I wanted to go through a couple of other areas here, but I'm going to stop here. A few highlights from the last council meeting included April being the month for donating life, or to highlight the importance of donating life. And I acknowledge that my uncle, Fred Robinson, is a kidney transplant recipient, and he's been living now with his kidney for 20 years. And this is a guy who actually donated a kidney to my dad before he passed away.
Wow. Okay.
I love you, Uncle Fred. We also want to give a shout out to Mr. Mark Smith in the 2nd District. John, you may remember Mark. He's run for office a couple of times in the city. He's
Yes.
a former police officer.
Yeah, did he run the 163?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes. So he received a kidney transplant a few months back. So he's healthy and doing well. We are grateful for that. April is also the month of sexual assault awareness, which is near and dear to my heart. And we have been doing a lot with some local groups and organizations. Congratulations to Miss Whitney Brigman for launching her 2nd annual event. And we're going to continue to do more with our Men Can Stop Rape and Athletes Can Stop Rape outreach as well. On the agenda also, John, was the virtual reality training simulator for our police department. And this is supposedly, I guess, a training device or an opportunity. You know, we've had an increased number of officer-involved shootings, and we touched on that briefly.
6 and 5 months.
Yes, and so on average, and this is how glaring the situation is with our police department. On average, we only would have had one officer-involved shooting.
Yeah. Well, the mayor called it an anomaly. I mean, that
I'm not sure who advised him to say that. Nonetheless, we know that we have a problem, and the test of a true leader is acknowledging that you have a problem, and the way you solve the problem is to tackle it in real ways. You know, John, despite all of what we have by way of interpersonal issues on our council, we really have a council who have a good blend of experience from varying backgrounds. And if we had a leader who could harness all of the years of education, experience, and knowledge that each of us bring to the table, because we do have a unique set and blend of experiences that could really help us dig our way out of a lot of what we're in within the city of Savannah. And unfortunately, that's not the case. So until we can get there, what I would like to do is encourage citizens to continue to mobilize, engage your city council via email, come to the city council meetings, tune in on Facebook, YouTube, or on the city government channel, if you will. Pay attention to what's going on. Again, John, I don't want us to have to wait until the next election for a change to come. I want these citizens to mobilize and make a demand of this council. It seems that any change or real shifts that we have experienced, it's when citizens have mobilized and made their voices heard. That's when this council moves.
Let me make an observation here because of what you said. I agree 100% with you. We should maintain our hope. We should stay engaged. We should keep doing what we're doing and do more of it. However, what's happening now in reality is the things that we projected, the problems we identified in your campaign, in the campaign 4 years before, and even going back 4 years after that, whether it was SCAD runaway growth, whether it was too many tourists, whether it was too many STVRs, whether it was police understaffing. The reality now is affirming that we were correct. We have patiently held our positions and done our best work.
I haven't been so patient.
And now things in the community are confirming in real time to people, and they're making that connection every day, Kesha. They're realizing that the spin and the rhetoric is zero, nutrition in it. It's empty carbs. It's not the real deal. And
and
those
it's really sad.
It's so bad and so dire for the general public to go, oh yeah, those guys, Kesha was right about that. Better Savannah was right about that. Port Wentworth isn't imploding. They're running along smoothly. It really wasn't the crisis that we were informed it was. So, I'm just grateful that I'm sad these things are happening. Whether it's shootings, whether it's violence, whether it's mismanagement of ARPA money. I mean, these things all accumulate, and they belie the rhetoric. So the rhetoric is getting counterbalanced organically by events on the ground. Weeping time, arena.
And John, and that's why I tell you, I drive hard. I'm not letting the media off the hook until they do a full turnaround on this. They have to be as intent as they were in covering and uncovering this foolishness, because all it did was, in particular me, it hurt my reputation tremendously. But bless God, most people are educated and they do not need a talking head on the news to tell them what real life is. They can feel it and they can see it. And so unless and until they get it right, you can't come half-cocked, Adam Van Brimmer. If you're going to tell the story, you tell the whole story, because you sat there in that city council meeting and you listened to my petition and my appeal and me advocate. And so what they ought to do is have integrity and balance in their reporting and in journalism. Don't just tell one side, and stop grouping the council together. Alicia Miller Blakely, Bernetta Bryant Lanier, and myself, we were the three dissenters when it came to going into not going into executive session. We wanted to go into executive session, I should say, to discuss this scathing report. He didn't say that.
Yeah.
Well, you just said this council has failed to respond. Don't do that.
Let me paraphrase that for you. And really what's happening is current events are bringing you vindication every single day now. So if you expect Adam Van Brimmer to ever burp that up, it isn't going to happen. But I assure you, the people in this city, and I love this city, are every day confronted with the lack of change, the lack of progress, the same old business as usual, and you are and will continue to be vindicated, and much is due you and those who have struggled to keep telling the truth when we're being told that we're shrill and fringe and we use foul language and this, that, and the other thing. So, yeah, don't expect it from Adam, but from me, I've never doubted you, and now I can see the public is vindicating you.
Well, John, as a wise woman, I'm going to let that be the last words of Kandily Kesha for this Monday's edition. Thank you so much, Savannah. Thank you, John. Tune in to Better Savannah on this Wednesday.
Thursday at 7:30, we have Todd Rhodes, the school board president candidate, live, and Chuck and Sid Chapman will be interviewing him. So tune in for that. Thanks for the plug.
Awesome. And that's this Thursday, Better Savannah on Facebook Live. And the time again, John?
7:30.
7:30. Listen,
Yes.
Thank you, Savannah. Thank you, John McMasters. We appreciate you. Thank you, ATR, for hosting tonight. We appreciate you as well. I love you, Savannah. Good night.
See you soon.
Like this.